the Alameda County Resource Conservation District, we've been working on this East Bay Wildlife Connectivity Project. You know, the goal of the project is to safely allow wildlife to move over or under interstate highways.
This is a problem in the East Bay. Mountain lions are basically functionally extinct in the East Bay. Only 10, 15 years ago, you could have found mountain lions in the East Bay Hills and the Diablo Range, but they're pretty much gone. There's a family of them actually right now just near 580 in Pleasanton Ridge area, and that's fairly unique. Wildlife in habitat like that, where you've got so much traffic going around it, because inevitably animals move, they get to the road, they get hit, they die, and you basically lose these populations. You also lose the incredibly important predator-prey interaction. So there's no ecosystem, terrestrial ecosystem pretty much in the world that survives without predator-prey interactions of some kind. And predators move around a lot to find their food, because their food's also trying to escape. So they move around a lot and they get hit way more often than their prey. About 15% of the mountain lion population gets killed every year by traffic in California. And that's a massive impact. There's no carnivore that can survive that rate of death, right? But what's happening in California is that mountain lions are immigrating from surrounding areas, including Baja, Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Oregon. And so we've created what's called an ecological sink, where those animals are basically coming in to die.
There are also some human elements as well. By increasing the opportunities for wildlife to cross, we're actually lowering the risk of wildlife vehicle collisions. So that's a benefit to human life, to human property as well.
We're standing at Schaefer Ranch Road. It's one of two undercrossings along the 580 stretch between Castro Valley and Dublin. It's a really important spot for connectivity, as wildlife have very few options to actually pass across 580 through this stretch. We've been doing camera trapping here for about 8 years, and we've seen things from deer and fox to coyotes and even badgers cross through here.
So this crossing structure is already being used. There's a lot of fencing along the highway, so there's not a lot of places that the animals are able to cross through. And actually, we see this, there's not a lot of roadkill along 580 here because there's such a barrier that animals don't even get close to the highway. It's still kind of a tricky site because there's a commuter road, a frontage road on the other side, but we have some ways to slow traffic down with putting some like wiggle into the road to slow people down. And then there's some really interesting technology that's coming out that you put cameras up, and if they detect wildlife coming towards the structures, they will actually start flashing a light in real time to get people to slow down.
Where we are standing right now, the Altamont Pass, is the narrowest point in the 200-mile-long Diablo Range. It's only 7 miles wide, wedged between the city of Livermore to the west and the city of Tracy and the Central Valley to the east. What sets it apart is several things. Incredible biodiversity. It's a hotspot within a hotspot. There's a wide array of endemic, meaning found nowhere else on Earth, species of plants and animals, and there are also a large number of rare species. And with development pressure from things like increased urbanization, houses, industrial development, agriculture in the Central Valley, water availability, climate change, what these creatures need is a relatively undisturbed large expanse where they can go about making their territories, reproducing, but also, if the need should arise, changing their location, migrating. What the Diablo Range is, it's a 200-mile long, north-south, relatively undeveloped, undisturbed corridor for wildlife, for plants to be able to move in the era of climate change in response to changing temperatures, drought, flood.
We're going to take advantage of this publicly owned land to connect it to some conserved land on the other side of 580 to get animals from here to the north and into Brushy Peak and hopefully eventually into Mount Diablo. Right now, elk and pumas are not on the north side of 580, even though historically they have been. So we would love to do some habitat restoration along this whole area to kind of draw them over to the north side where they are supposed to be. We picked this spot here for an overcrossing structure over 580. Not just because of the ownership, but also because the topology of 580 is difficult in that after Livermore, it starts to split apart and becomes farther and farther apart, and it becomes really difficult to build a continuous structure. So here the 580 is quite narrow, and it makes it a lot cheaper to actually build a structure. Not to mention that a lot of wildlife tend to hug the edges of cities. So we're hoping to use that to our advantage. Animals will hit Livermore and kind of skirt around the side of it, and we'll get those animals to get across here. The topography itself doesn't lend itself to an underpass. It's just the hills are too rolling, and a lot of times quite steep drop off the road. So it needs to be an overcrossing at this location.
We really don't have a stable population of mountain lion on Mount Diablo, even though we know where they were there in the past. With the East Bay Wildlife Connectivity Project and the wildlife overcrossing that they're trying to plan for, we think we could have a big key in getting these large charismatic predators, these large charismatic species, back in the mountain, controlling populations of herbivores that a lot of people will tell you there are a lot of them, introducing genetic diversity, but also getting more interchange of things like elk, which were also here present long ago but have since disappeared. They are present further south in the Diablo Range, and we think it'd be such an incredible restoration of ecosystem function and a success in a time where we need as many successes as we can have with the environment and conservation to bring them back to the mountain.